In August 2023, Cambodia witnessed a historic transition of power. Hun Sen, the country's long-standing prime minister, stepped down after decades at the helm. His successor was none other than his son, Hun Manet. This marked the beginning of a new era for Cambodia, one filled with both anticipation and uncertainty. Hun Manet, educated in the West and a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, brought a different perspective to Cambodian leadership. His background contrasted sharply with his father's. However, the younger Hun inherited a complex political landscape. Challenges awaited him, testing his ability to navigate both domestic and international pressures. The world watched with keen interest. Would Hun Manet follow in his father's footsteps, or would he chart a new course for Cambodia? The answer, it seemed, would be a complex blend of continuity and change. The early days of his administration offered glimpses into his leadership style. The transition itself was peaceful, a testament to the ruling party's grip on power. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. The true test for Hun Manet lay in addressing these underlying issues. His success or failure would determine Cambodia's trajectory in the years to come. Hun Manet's rise to power was not met with universal acclaim. Opposition groups, long marginalized under Hun Sen's rule, saw the transition as an opportunity. They hoped for greater political freedoms and a more open society. Protests erupted in various parts of the country, a visible sign of the simmering discontent. These protests, while relatively small in scale, presented an early challenge to Hun Manet's authority. They served as a reminder of the fragile political landscape he inherited. The new prime minister faced a critical choice: to suppress dissent as his father had done, or to seek a more conciliatory approach. The government's response was swift and decisive. Security forces moved in to disperse the protests, arresting dozens of demonstrators. Human rights groups condemned the crackdown, accusing the government of using excessive force. They argued that peaceful assembly was a fundamental right and that the arrests were politically motivated. The situation highlighted the deep divisions that persisted within Cambodian society. Hun Manet, eager to assert his authority and maintain stability, appeared to be following his father's playbook. The international community, particularly Western nations, expressed concern over the crackdown, urging the Cambodian government to respect human rights. One of the most contentious issues that emerged during Hun Manet's early months in office was the Cambodia-Laos-Vietnam Development Triangle Area Agreement, also known as the CLV-DTA. This trilateral economic zone, encompassing parts of all three countries, aimed to boost regional development and cooperation. However, it also sparked fears and anxieties within Cambodia. Critics of the CLV-DTA argued that it would primarily benefit Vietnam, the region's economic powerhouse. They expressed concerns about land concessions granted to Vietnamese companies and the potential influx of Vietnamese workers. Some even saw the agreement as a threat to Cambodian sovereignty, a sensitive issue given the historical tensions between the two nations. Protests against the CLV-DTA gained momentum, fueled by social media and online activism. Expatriate Cambodians, many of whom had fled the country during the Khmer Rouge regime, played a significant role in amplifying these concerns. They used their platforms to raise awareness and mobilize support for the protests. The government, however, remained steadfast in its support for the CLV-DTA. It argued that the project would bring much-needed investment and development to impoverished areas. Officials dismissed concerns about Vietnamese influence, emphasizing the economic benefits that would accrue to Cambodia. The controversy highlighted the complexities of regional integration and the challenges of balancing national interests with regional cooperation. Faced with growing dissent, Hun Manet's administration adopted a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, it sought to justify the CLV-DTA to the Cambodian people, highlighting its economic benefits and downplaying concerns about Vietnamese influence. On the other hand, it moved swiftly to quash the protests, arresting organizers and accusing them of inciting violence. Hun Manet, in a televised address, defended the government's actions. He accused the protesters of being manipulated by foreign powers seeking to destabilize Cambodia. He drew parallels to the country's turbulent past, warning that chaos and instability would only hinder progress. "We will not allow a small group of individuals to undermine the peace and stability that we have worked so hard to achieve," Hun Manet declared. His words resonated with many Cambodians, who had experienced firsthand the horrors of the Khmer Rouge era. The government's crackdown drew criticism from human rights groups, who accused it of using the pretext of national security to stifle dissent. They argued that the arrests were arbitrary and that the protesters were simply exercising their right to free speech. The international community, particularly Western nations, expressed concern over the situation, urging the Cambodian government to respect human rights and engage in dialogue with its critics. Section 5. International Reactions, a Divided Global Stage. The international community's response to Hun Manet's handling of the protests was divided. Western governments, long critical of Cambodia's human rights record, condemned the crackdown and called for the release of those detained. The United States, in particular, expressed deep concern, with the State Department issuing a statement urging the Cambodian government to respect the fundamental freedoms of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. However, other countries, notably China, adopted a more muted tone. Beijing, a close ally of Phnom Penh and a major investor in Cambodia, refrained from criticizing the government's actions. Instead, Chinese officials emphasized the importance of stability and development, echoing the rhetoric of Hun Manet's administration. This divergence in international reactions reflected the broader geopolitical landscape. Cambodia, once firmly within the Western sphere of influence, had increasingly gravitated towards China in recent years. This shift in alliances had significant implications for the country's domestic politics, as the government felt emboldened by Beijing's tacit support. The situation highlighted the challenges faced by countries caught in the middle of great power rivalry. Cambodia's dependence on both Western aid and Chinese investment created a delicate balancing act for Hun Manet, who sought to maintain good relations with all sides while also asserting his own authority. Section 6. Economic Powerhouse, Cambodia's Projected Growth. Despite the political challenges, Cambodia's economy continued to show remarkable resilience. The World Bank projected a GDP growth rate of 6.3% for 2025, making it one of the fastest-growing economies in Southeast Asia. This impressive performance was driven by a number of factors, including a thriving garment industry, a booming tourism sector, and increasing foreign investment. The garment industry, Cambodia's largest export earner, benefited from preferential trade agreements with the European Union and the United States. Although these agreements face scrutiny due to concerns about labor rights, they continued to provide a vital lifeline for the Cambodian economy. Tourism, another key sector, rebounded strongly after the COVID-19 pandemic. Cambodia's rich cultural heritage, including the iconic temples of Angkor Wat, continued to attract visitors from around the world. The government invested heavily in tourism infrastructure, aiming to further boost this crucial sector. Foreign investment, particularly from China, played a pivotal role in Cambodia's economic growth. Chinese companies invested heavily in infrastructure projects such as roads, bridges, and special economic zones. These investments created jobs, boosted connectivity, and contributed to Cambodia's overall development. Section 7. The Dragon's Embrace, China's Strategic Investments. China's economic footprint in Cambodia was undeniable. Beijing had become Phnom Penh's largest trading partner and its most important source of foreign direct investment. Chinese companies poured billions of dollars into Cambodia, financing infrastructure projects, building factories, and developing special economic zones. This influx of Chinese capital had a transformative impact on Cambodia's economy. It spurred infrastructure development, created jobs, and fueled economic growth. However, it also raised concerns about debt sustainability and dependence on a single country. Critics argued that Cambodia was becoming overly reliant on China and that this dependence came at a cost. They pointed to the example of Sri Lanka, which was forced to cede control of a strategic port to China after defaulting on its debts. The Cambodian government, however, dismissed these concerns, arguing that Chinese investments were mutually beneficial. They emphasized that China was a reliable partner and that its investments were helping to lift Cambodia out of poverty. The debate over Chinese influence highlighted the complexities of navigating great power competition in the 21st century. Section 8. Expanding Horizons, Regional Trade Agreements and Partnerships. In addition to its close ties with China, Cambodia also sought to strengthen economic partnerships with other countries. The country joined the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, the world's largest free trade agreement, which included all 10 ASEAN member states, as well as China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. RCEP aimed to reduce tariffs, harmonize trade rules, and promote investment among its member states. For Cambodia, it presented an opportunity to diversify its export markets and attract more foreign investment. The agreement was expected to boost regional trade and economic integration, creating new opportunities for Cambodian businesses and workers. Cambodia also sought to enhance bilateral trade relations with other countries, particularly in Southeast Asia. Hun Manet's administration prioritized strengthening ties with Vietnam, the Philippines, and Thailand, recognizing the importance of regional cooperation for economic development. These efforts to expand trade and investment partnerships reflected Cambodia's ambition to become a more integrated and prosperous member of the global economy. By diversifying its economic relationships, Cambodia aimed to reduce its dependence on any single country and create a more resilient and sustainable economic model. Section 9. A future unfolding, assessing Hun Manet's impact. Hun Manet's first year in office presented a mixed bag. On the economic front, Cambodia continued to thrive, with strong growth projections and increasing foreign investment. The country's participation in regional trade agreements like RCEP offered further opportunities for economic expansion. However, on the political front, challenges remained. The crackdown on dissent, particularly in relation to the CLV-DTA, raised concerns about human rights and freedom of expression. The international community's divided response highlighted the complexities of navigating great power competition and the trade-offs involved in pursuing economic development at the expense of political freedoms. Hun Manet's leadership style, while different from his father's in some respects, also showed signs of continuity. The emphasis on stability and development remained paramount, and the government showed little tolerance for dissent. Whether Hun Manet would be able to consolidate his authority while also addressing concerns about human rights and democratic reforms remained to be seen. The future of Cambodia under Hun Manet's leadership was still being written. The country stood at a crossroads, with both opportunities and challenges on the horizon. How Hun Manet navigated this complex landscape would determine Cambodia's trajectory in the years to come.